I've managed to rinse 20 episodes of this series out of Rust so far. Hey! Rust really is the conceptual gift that doesn't know when to stop giving, thanks in part to a player base with an extremely furtive imagination. If you've just joined us, you've got a bit of catching up to do, but welcome to
Concept Limbo!
Episode 21. In the previous part, I took a special look back at my top 10 official Rust concepts that are still as yet unused, and I threatened to start looking at more community concepts in this one. Well, I'm making good on that threat here and now, and I'm going to start with something that's about as fun to use as it is to say. And that is a ballista! No, not one of those. So, technically, these are nothing new. The Greeks and Romans were twanging them at people as far back as Greek and Roman times, and in the centuries that followed, many others came to appreciate the finer points of launching what were basically huge one-shot kills on sticks, or a variety of other projectiles, in the general direction of their enemies' faces. I mean, some of these things were humongous. Either that or the Romans were munchkins. What's that, Mr. Froggy Boot? A lot of them were? Okay, this is probably a bit deceptive then. Anyway, not a small amount of players have suggested a weapon like this over the last 5 years, but I wanted to take aim at two of the more rounded out examples. First of all, in July of this year, Redditor Saturn01 wrote an essay pointing out the pros and cons of the ballista life, the plus points being range and power naturally, cooking fools from up to 300 feet and using spears as ammo. The cons being that it would be stationary, requiring a sitting duck to man it, and it would probably have a long reload time. It would need to be a one-hit kill to justify the risk and lack of maneuverability, as Rust's combat is made a lot easier if you move about like a hyperactive gerbil with separation anxiety. The other concept, which is featured on the thumbnail of this vid, to all intents and purposes looks like it should already be in Rust. In fact, I had to have a look in the items list just to make sure. Only a couple of months ago, Redditor Scotty610 crafted this absolute unit based quite closely on a Roman Scorpio catapult, and he seems to have done most of the modelling work for Face Punch if they ever decide to use it. Hint, hint, the rubbish it's made from would make a Womble's junk pile quiver, and I can totally see someone using this in-game. From repurposed air tanks protecting the ropes, to skis for the arms, and a set of bike pedals to pull the bowstring back. There are even headlights on it in case you want to do some, nighttime spear fishing. Attaching a bean can grenade to a spear to make an anti-vehicle projectile was also suggested. I wonder if he's been watching this series. There's no doubt ballistas sound cool, and I can see them as either long-distance manual base defense turrets, which I'm sure would never be abused by roof campers, or providing some great ranged suppressive fire for a raid party. Or wiping half of them out, depending on who you put in charge of it. I think one of the reasons why ballistas have been such a popular suggestion is because they're primitive, or at least a lot more primitive than most of what we have, and I see a lot of players gagging for more equipment in the lower tiers than anywhere else. Personally, I feel Rust should be more like Mad Max meets MacGyver on the set of Scrap Heap Challenge than Call of Duty with bases. After all, the primitive lifestyle is what brought a lot of us to it in the first place. So with that in mind, we now go from stationary turrets firing Titan's toothpicks to something portable that you can use to fling your balls of stone with. So, way back in episode 4, I touched briefly on some official slingshot concepts, including the classic Borat Mark III, but these were, of course, never used. Fast forward through the months, and the community have not only suggested them a number of times, but have also, like with the ballista, made their own models. The first that I came across was this one by Hawkeye Bit, who, incidentally, modelled the bean can grenade spear idea from 3 episodes back, and although it's clearly meant to be about the most basic setup possible, just an old stick and a bit of elastic, that's about all you need to crack a skull. The only drawback I can see is no pocket to hold the stone or whatever, but the thought was there. Moving on a bit, this other model was produced by Vaskara, whose Rust art you may have seen in a number of places. Again, not super complex, but then there's only so much you can do with a big rubber band. This one makes use of metal arms, actually has a pocket for the shot, and even though it looks built for speed rather than comfort, I feel it wouldn't be out of place in the game. The latest model to grace our screens though, and arguably the best engineered looking, has to go to this one, again by Scotty610, who modelled the ballista. He wrote a short novel on what he'd use one for too, as some of you might be wondering what the point of a slingshot would be. He said he thought its primary purpose could be to knock other players unconscious, unless they were wearing a helmet, in which case it could cause a temporary dazed or vision blurring effect. Now, I'm not sure about unconsciousness in Rust. I think anything like that that would be abused and leveraged to the max by everyone and his dog. But there could be other uses, as he continues, including causing distractions for both players and AI by strategically placed shots to objects in the environment. This could be quite useful in the military tunnels, for instance, by giving the bored scientists something to investigate. Although small stones could be a very cheap and readily available form of ammo, maybe we should think outside the box a bit. Maybe, just maybe, if the slingshot was the right size and the elastic was tight enough, you could use it to lob grenades of friendship, perhaps even go super primitive and combine it with this concept that I looked at quite a while ago. And I'm sure you won't need to strain too hard to understand what I'm getting at. Talking of which, there was one more slingshot-related bit of artwork that I've saved till last because I feel it represents the pinnacle of what the Rust community can produce when they've had access to a pack of crayons and a well-rested bonus. Introducing Ishafei's Yote Shot concept, labelled as a portable rocket launcher for creaming zergs and allowing badly drawn nakeds everywhere to single-handedly take down an entire server. Called a Yote Shot because Yote is the past tense of yeet, obviously. It does make a couple of assumptions, most notably finding a rocket in a barrel. I think Bamer's Beth summed it up best when he said, "You should be ashamed." Now, from things that fling to things that sting, and the loneliest weapon in Rust at the moment has to be the bone knife. I mean, you could say that the next step up would be a sword, but there's still a gaping hole where a more advanced hunting knife should be wedged. Well, just such a thing has also been frequently suggested, and it was in February of 2018 when Reddit user Jello slapped something together that just looked superbly fitting to the Rusty world. This concept of upcycled trash is a theme that should be the hallmark of any good Rust design, and I'm impressed by how well the community continues to grasp this particular nettle. Jello's concept for a salvaged knife was inspired by the handle from an emergency window breaker. You know, those things you fantasize about grabbing and going ape at the glass with whenever you have to sit on a coach for hours on end. Another Reddit user, Diva Dan, really liked this idea and offered to model it properly, which he did. It didn't take him long to lovingly recreate Jello's design in 3 dimensions, and within a few days, the finished model was up on Sketchfab. I'll leave you a link to it in the description so you can go and have a swivel yourself. Probably the only thing I'd change would be the blood, which is a bit bright and unnecessary if you ask me. Perhaps rough the blade up a bit or add some, I don't know, rust. Now, the obvious benefits of a higher tier knife, apart from one-upmanship, would be higher damage and faster gathering, but other possible uses have surfaced recently, shall we say. There's this concept from November 2018 shows. User Thek121 wanted a specialised diving knife to help with underwater things, as he felt it would finally make diving a viable method for scrap farming by speeding up the process of untying crates. I'm not sure that's actually a massive concern really, or that you should need a specialised tool to do it. I think he just wanted an excuse for having something that looks cool, to be honest. He might actually have been onto something though, as later that day, another user, Waggy1, posted footage from a plugin that his mate made, which lets you go nuclear on such knotty problems with your axe. So the demand is there, it seems, but really, you should be able to use anything. Okay, so some of you are no doubt thinking, didn't we have a new knife introduced at Halloween? Well, yeah, but can you actually use them at other times of the year as default? Yeah, it's a good point though, the work has been done, and a different model could be all that's needed, which we have. So as far as low-hanging fruit goes, this banana is draping on the ground. I hope you've enjoyed this trip to the primitive side of town, and I'd love to know what's going on inside your heads right now, I think. So please, let me know in the comments. Fool around with the like and subscribe buttons until something positive happens, and slap that bell until it begs you to stop. Come and join all the fashionable people over on my Twitch, Twitter, Discord and Steam group, and I shall catch you all soon somewhere. But in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.